Welcome to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. This is a podcast for faithful women who want healing in their relationships, guidance from God, and internal peace. Each week, you'll hear mental health concepts taught through a spiritual lens from me, a licensed clinical mental health counselor, to help you start thinking in a higher and holier way. All right, I am so excited to welcome an awesome guest this week. We have Dr. Fred Dodini on. He's a therapist, an author, and a wealth of knowledge about self-care and the gospel. And so welcome, Dr. Dodini. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So maybe do a little introduction about yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your experience, your book. We'd love to hear about you.
Great. I'm a convert to the church. I was 20 when I got baptized. Raised in a Catholic family. In fact, I studied to be a Catholic priest when I was young. I entered the seminary system when I was 14, and spent about 3.5 years in the seminary program. And then I began to feel, the more I studied, the history and the doctrines of the Catholic Church, the more I began to realize there were some problems there and some issues. And so I began I remember just weeks after I decided to leave the seminary, I had an experience in prayer. I was just, kneeling by my bed one night, and this, like I said, just about a month after I decided to leave the seminary. And I simply asked Heavenly Father, I said, if there is truth to be found on the earth, please lead me to it.
Wow.
I got an immediate answer.
Wow.
Yeah. Unmistakable, undeniable, very clear. And the answer was, your prayer has been heard and will be answered, and a specific time frame when that would happen.
Wow.
And so it was 2 years. And I was, why do I have to wait for 2 years? I'm ready now. Come on.
Right.
I just asked, give me the answer.
Right,
So,
exactly.
but in a lot of ways, I probably wasn't ready at that time, but when the time was right. And it was interesting because when it did happen, I was going to community college. I met some other LDS kids there. I'd grown up in my hometown of Gridley, California. I went to school with several kids who were LDS, and I actually attended a sacrament meeting on a couple of occasions. We used to talk about religion during lunch hours and stuff, and just kind of hang out together. And the more I began to learn a little bit more about it, the more the Spirit began to just push and prod and prompt. And so I went to an inactive musician friend of mine. We had been in a band together, and asked him if he had a copy of the Book of Mormon. He said, no, but my grandmother does. And so he got on the phone, and about 5 minutes later, his grandmother came sprinting across the street. She just lived a few doors down, and so read the Book of Mormon and went to a professor on college on the campus who I was LDS, and said, I've read the Book of Mormon. I want to know more. And he put me in touch with the missionaries, and the rest is kind of history. And as I was thinking about it months after I got baptized, it just dawned on me that experience I'd had in prayer happened. It was a midweek day in mid-January. In 1970, 1970. And the first time I opened the Book of Mormon and began reading was on a midweek day in mid-January in 1972. So it was virtually 2 years to the day, practically, that I had that experience. And I'd almost forgotten about the time frame during that time. But anyway, that's my experience with the church. My wife, Pat, was one of those kids in our little group that used to sit around and discuss religion and philosophy. And we've been married now for 51 years, and we have 10 children and 35 grandchildren and counting. There's more on the way. So
fun.
Great experiences. When I graduated from college, I spent 8 years on the road touring as a musician in a 50s rock and roll show band. I joined one when I was in college, and I was in a band with some guys from the student branch, this branch in Chico at the college there. We'd been playing on the outdoor quad area, and this other guy had seen the band and ran into our guitar player in the music store one day and said, we're looking for another guitar player and bass player. We want to go on the road and tour. And well, our guitar player was just getting ready to leave on a mission, but he put him in touch with me, and I thought, I don't want to join a 50s band and jump around on stage and wear
Yeah.
clothes and put dippity doo in my hair. But the Spirit just really, this is it. This is what you're supposed to do.
Wow.
And I kind of went kicking and screaming into it. But I spent 2 years with that band and 2 years, 6 years with a bigger touring oldies band that was based in Orlando, Florida. And did another 6 years with them. And finally the Lord said, we're done. And that door closed.
Yeah.
And I went on with my life. So anyway,
Wow, that's an
kind of
awesome
a
story.
very diverse background, from being a
Yes.
seminary student to being a rock and roll musician and all that. But it was in a lot of ways good preparation for my job as a therapist.
Yeah.
I got to meet all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds and situations in life and stuff. So it's been an interesting ride.
Wow. That's
And
awesome.
you mentioned job wise. After I finished my PhD at Purdue University, I got an offer to be the clinical director for the Anasazi Foundation. It's a wilderness program in
Yeah.
Arizona. And so the idea for the book was kind of germinating a little bit before that. I was using the sun, the moon, and the stars as examples, metaphors for the kind of choices we make in life. And so in a wilderness program, kids are spending 6 to 8 weeks living very primitively out in the wilderness. So we were always looking for some aspect of their experience in the natural world we could use as a teaching
Yeah.
metaphor.
Yeah.
And so I got a chance to talk with a lot of the kids there in the program. And one particular conversation stands out in memory. It was a 17-year-old boy from Beverly Hills. Family was very wealthy. Mom was totally Hollywood, totally Rodeo Drive, hung out with all her Hollywood friends. Dad was very, very rich, successful. I think he was a plastic surgeon. I can't remember exactly, but their sons just rejected all of that. And he was
Yeah.
angry and not doing well in school and smoking things he shouldn't have been smoking. And so I think they sent him to us to give him a taste of what life outside of Beverly Hills would be like,
Yeah.
and that maybe sleeping on the ground for a few weeks would make him appreciate the Beverly Hills lifestyle. That was not our purpose.
Yeah.
So he was a little hard to get to talk, and I remember sitting with him on the side of a mountain and said, we're not here to tell you how to live your life. That's a decision you get to make.
Hmm.
Your parents can't make it for you. I'm not going to make it for you. Even God won't make that decision for you. You get to choose. But let me tell you what your options are. And that kind of got his attention. They said there's three kinds of people in the world: sun people, moon people, and star people. What are you talking about? I said, okay, well, look up. What do you see? He said, I see the sun. Okay, so what? I said, well, what does it do? It provides light. Yeah. Provides warmth. Yeah. Provides nutrition. Vitamin D comes from sunlight. We need it for plants to grow, so we have food to eat. We need it for photosynthesis, so we have oxygen to breathe. And the sun uses its mass to create a powerful force, a gravity force that guides the orbit of the Earth. The Earth is just the right distance from the sun, or life couldn't exist on this planet. So the sun really exists to serve
Mm.
the smaller, weaker of us, the Earth. And I said some people are the same way. They provide light in the form of knowledge, wisdom, life experience. They provide warmth in the form of compassion and love.
Mm.
They provide nutrition in the form of service to the bodies, the minds, and the spirits of all those around them. And they use their power, their wealth, their education, their positions of influence in the world to guide other people's lives in a positive direction.
Mm.
So that's really the focus of their lives. And I asked him, I said, have you ever met any sun people? And he said, yeah. And I asked him, how do you feel when you're around them? He paused for a moment. He said, I feel good. I feel like I have value. I'm a person to them. They really seem to care about me.
Mm.
And I said, yeah, that's been my experience too. I said, what about the moon? What do you know about the moon? Well, it doesn't produce its own light, just what's reflected from the sun. So that means the moon is always half in the light and half in the dark. And then every now and then you'll have a full moon in the night sky, and it'll suddenly start to get smaller and smaller till the whole moon is totally in the dark. And then it gradually starts to relight again. I said, do you know what causes that? He said, dude, it's a lunar eclipse. And he was from California, so they still said dude back then. And I said, really, what causes that to happen? And he says, well, it's the orbit. The Earth's orbit causes it to pass right between the sun and the moon, so it blocks the light of the sun from reaching the moon. And I said, isn't that amazing that nature has provided a regular reminder of what happens to people who let the world get in the way?
Mm.
They invite darkness into their lives. Their lives are part in the light, part in the dark, right? That's the moon, half light, half dark. So moon people are always trying to decide, um, choose between truth and error, good and evil. And the more they let the world get in the way and become the focus in their lives, the more darkness seems to enter it. So moon people are pretty much focused on themselves. They want to be rich and successful and popular and entertained and all that sort of thing. So they don't really care too much about other people. I said, said, do you know any moon people? And he said, yes, I live with them.
Yeah.
And okay, I wasn't going to debate that. So I said, how do you feel when you're around them? And he said, insignificant. I don't
Mm.
really have any value. If I don't
Wow.
bring anything of value to them, then they don't seem to care much about me. I
Mm.
said, okay, well, what about stars? Stars are just a tiny, tiny pinpoint of light in the night sky, a sea of darkness. So a star doesn't provide much light here to the earth, and it doesn't provide any warmth.
Yeah.
And so I said, star people are the kind of the same way. What little light and warmth they may have, they don't value. They don't grow it. They don't have anything to share with other people, but they don't care about other people. They prefer darkness. And what they want is power. And they'll do whatever it takes to get it. Star people will lie all the time. They steal, they cheat, they kill, whatever it takes to get power and control over other people. I said, you've ever met any star people? And he said, yeah, you do want to be around those people because they will hurt you. He said, okay, so
Yeah.
you've seen it. I said, we're just here to try and give you examples of what that would look like. The staff at Anasazi were really, really great. I mean, it was not a boot camp environment at all. Very warm-hearted, very kind, compassionate people. And we just want to give you an idea of what your options are for determining your future, your destiny. And out here in nature is one of the best places to think about it. And you get a lot of
Mhm.
time to do that. And so as I was getting up to leave and end the conversation, I turned to him and I said, for the rest of your life, every time you look up in the sky, you're going to remember this conversation. He
Yeah.
laughed. He said, dude, you're totally in my head now. And I said, yeah, it's kind of the idea.
You're right.
So yeah, things got much better after that. We had a lot of good conversations. So that's been the theme for the book.
Yeah.
Um, it obviously comes from chapter 15 of First Corinthians, where Paul talks about the resurrection and that
Mm.
our bodies will come forth in one of the three states of glory. He compares to the sun, the moon, and the stars, celestial, terrestrial, telestial. Section 76 of the Doctrine and Covenants gives us a whole lot more information about that outcome. And certainly President Nelson has been emphasizing when he talked about, thinking celestial. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I give examples of all three as individuals, spouses, parents, and citizens in the community. But the focus is certainly on, I emphasize the importance of if you want to be a sun person, you have to learn sun principles and values. You have to incorporate them in your life, and then you'll want to do the same for others. That's kind of what sun people are about. So that's what the book is about.
I
Shine
love
Brighter
that.
just looks at um, the three kinds of individuals as individuals, spouses, parents, and then citizens in the community.
I love that. I love, thank you for taking time to explain that. That symbolism and kind of analogy is so helpful and visual with that. And I love how you're going to take what a sun person envelops and talk about how the Sabbath day can really be a self-care day. So this month we're talking about self-care and how important it is to
Yeah,
us. So let's maybe dive into that. So we want to talk about three ways that people can take the Sabbath and really create it as a self-care day. So what's one of your tips
yeah,
for people as a sun person to
yeah.
make that happen?
Well, when you think about it, I mean, the second great commandment, right, was to love others as we love ourselves. And so self-care is, I think, is an important part of every sun person's life.
Mm.
Celestial people, what their focus is on is bringing light and truth and blessings to the lives of other people. That's what the Savior did. That's
Yeah.
the ultimate. It's not just the SUN people we're talking about, it's the SON people, really.
So true, right? Yeah.
And so, how do we go about that? Well, when I was a kid, most stores were closed on Sundays. I lived in a very small farming community in Northern California, and so the whole town was kind of shut down. Families spent time together. They went to church together. It was a day of rest, and
Yeah.
we're losing that in our culture. And I think it's having a negative impact for us as individuals, as couples, as families, as spouses, and the community at large. We're
Mhm.
not taking the time for self-care. We're so focused on, competition and making money and running our businesses and all that sort of stuff that we have begun to overlook what the Sabbath was really intended for. When the Savior said the Sabbath was created for man, not man for the Sabbath,
Mm.
it was just a reminder is that we can't push ourselves 7 days a week nonstop. We
Yeah.
have to take a break for physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being and healing.
Yeah.
And the Sabbath was really always intended for that.
Mm.
And so I think the first tip for for honoring the Sabbath is to honor the Sabbath, is to remember what the rules were. We may not be able to do everything the way it was done anciently, you know,
Mhm.
and we don't have the real strict prescriptive kind of limitations that the Jews dealt with. But I think we certainly understand the spirit of the day, that it's intended to a day where we focus less on the things of the world, the moon things, and more on the sun things. Our relationship with God and with the Savior, our study and understanding of the scriptures. So I think that's the first step is to treat the Sabbath day the way it was intended,
Mm.
so that we allow ourselves, we don't overschedule ourselves, we don't book so many things that we don't have time for our rest, for conversation, for time with our families. And
Mhm.
our culture is intruding more and more on that day. Um,
Sometimes even church culture intrudes on that day, right?
well,
That
it
yeah.
does,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah,
Yeah.
I serve on the High Council, and my friends who are bishops and stuff talk about Sunday's one of their busiest days. There's
Yeah.
meetings and stuff all day long,
Mhm.
and a lot of new bishops have been counseled that don't let that happen.
Mhm.
You don't spend more than X amount of hours per week at the church, otherwise you're depriving yourself of time with your family.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we can let good intentions creep in and limit the time we have to really do what the Sabbath was intended to do, to
So true.
strengthen our relationships. Doesn't mean we
Yeah.
can't serve others, that's part of it, but it can't be exclusively that.
Yeah. What would be some examples if someone was, let's say, remembering what the Sabbath was for and doing sun things, SON things?
Yeah.
What would be an example of that if someone knew they were doing that?
If they were not
If they
using the
were
Sabbath day,
enveloping that as implementing that as being a
implementing
sun
some
person. Yeah.
principles.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the first aspect of what does the sun do for it? It provides light.
Mhm.
Okay, so we should be. I think it's one of the most important parts of the Sabbath is our scripture study. Certainly,
Mhm.
we should be reading on a daily basis, hopefully. But that especially, I think we should set aside time for that.
Mhm.
Um, I know people that listen to a lot of podcasts. Sunday's the only time they seem to be able to do it, and
Yeah.
that can be a very enlightening experience for people.
Yeah.
There's so many great resources on the church's websites and on podcasts. A lot of good people out there using, the tools, the communication tools we have to do that.
Mhm.
So we have to be careful about allowing ourselves time to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that.
and really thinking about how those principles apply in our own lives
Yeah.
during the rest of the week, because that's when we get the opportunity to really apply them,
Yeah.
is in our everyday interactions with other people.
I love that. So tip number one is really spending time connecting with the Son or the Savior and
Mhm.
building that relationship. And what are the activities that you're doing to set that time aside? to build that relationship with the
Yeah,
Savior.
and protecting that time. That was
Yeah, that's
kind of
so
the
true.
first step is if we don't make it a priority, other things will be. And
Mm,
it's really easy. I mean, I've some of our grandkids here in Carmel, they're involved in a lot of sporting things. Well, a lot of them are played on Sundays because that's when the fields are available.
yeah,
And a lot of kids are on travel teams, soccer and baseball and all this stuff. And so athletics has become kind of a second religion to some people in some
so true.
places.
Yeah, yeah,
And although it's a great experience for kids to have, you have to decide what the priority is and not let it interfere too much in the other aspects of family life.
I love that. So making your relationship with the Son a priority and scheduling that time so
Exactly.
that life doesn't take over
Yeah.
and you
And,
still
the
have your
Savior
left.
never had a problem with taking time for his relationship with his Father. He would get up early in the morning. He would go out into the wilderness, and I'm sure the apostles were, "Where'd he go?"
Yeah,
Everybody wanted to see him and be around him and talk to him. He never apologized for
yeah,
taking time for himself to refresh himself physically and spiritually
yeah.
by taking that time to himself and to deep prayer and meditation. So that's certainly part of it.
Awesome. Great. All
And
right.
and the other thing I was thinking about was kind of goes back to it was I heard an interview with President Oaks and his wife, and and he mentioned in their conversation that the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 had really been fasting and praying to know what's the one thing that they could suggest to the people, the members of the church, that would have the most powerful and positive impact in their excuse me in their lives at this moment.
Mhm.
And so he didn't say anything. So his wife looked at him and said, "Are you going to tell him?" And he says, "Well, I'm not sure." He said, she said, "Well, if you don't tell him, I'm going to tell him." And so she said, the answer was, "Well, keep the Sabbath."
Mm,
And so President Oak started talking more about that. And I think I think keeping the Sabbath can have a powerful effect on us as individuals, families, and communities. We're losing that sense of reverence, and we're losing that connection as members of our community.
mm.
And I think today, with there's so much that's divisive in the political and social and even religious worlds, I think part of it is due to that fact that
Mhm.
we don't respect and honor the Sabbath, and the Lord can't bless us with the way in many of the ways He would like to, unless we do.
Yeah,
Um, are you going to talk all these businesses into closing on Sundays? Well, there have been a few communities that got together and did exactly that.
yeah,
Smaller towns, right? They just said,
yeah,
"Hey, this is not working well. We want to go back to the way things were," and they did. And all the blessings that were promised, they did better socially. They actually did better in their business being closed on Sundays.
yeah,
I don't know what the numbers are for Chick-fil-A, but I know they don't open on
yeah,
Sundays, but
yeah.
they seem to be doing quite well.
Right, right.
So
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's the third tip is how can we foster Sabbath observance, um, not just in our homes, but in our communities? Is there a way to encourage others to do the same thing so that their families, their communities can receive the same blessings?
Mhm.
And so I think if we look for opportunities to talk about this and how our families, what we do and don't do on Sundays, we there's lots of times as a member of the church, people ask us to, join in some activity or something, and we say, well, I'm not available. Monday nights is family night. Oh, really? What's that? Well, it gives a chance to talk about family home evening.
Mhm.
So if we say to people, yeah, we'd love to join you on that activity, we usually spend our Sundays, our Sabbath day, doing some other family activities and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I think just speaking up about how we practice our religion and how we honor the Sabbath invites other people to do the same thing, and that makes it easier for everybody else to participate as well.
I love that. So making sure that we're helping the people around us to observe the Sabbath so that we have that time to do it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, because that was one of the qualities of the sun, right? It guides the Earth's orbit. And the sun people, we want to be a guiding influence in the life of other people.
Mm.
And we may not be able to teach them in detail about the restoration and all those types of things, but we can certainly model and demonstrate and teach some aspects of the gospel that maybe other people would be willing to consider.
Yeah.
Um, Especially if they have in the past, they can compare what life is like now compared to maybe it was years ago, if they lived in a community where things were closed down on Sundays.
Yeah. I love that. If you're enjoying this episode, then you might also enjoy my newest product release, the LDS Mental Health Skills Deck, where you get 52 unique skill cards to strengthen and fortify your mental health, so you can have clarity in your thoughts for more peace and cope with life stresses. You'll also be able to communicate your needs and desires and connect and improve relationships. And you'll be able to process your emotions to create healing and have better self-care. If you need these skills in your life, then click the link in my show notes and get your skills deck today. All right, back to the episode. So if you were to recap those three tips for making the Sabbath day a self-care day, how would you recap that?
First, commit to honor the Sabbath as it should be. Second, make time on the Sabbath for personal growth, personal rest, as well as relationship. As a therapist, I often encourage families to have like a family council meeting on a regular basis. Sunday seems to be a good day for that because you can teach gospel principles at the same time you're talking about schedules for the week and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of family organization is an important element in successful families. They communicate well and they plan things together.
Mm-hmm.
And then spread the word. Invite others to join you. That's an incentive for us to continue to honor and keep the Sabbath, because if we see others who are willing to do the same thing, we support each other in that process.
Mm-hmm. I like that concept of that a sun person not only uh, absorbs the light, but also gives the light, right? And so that's very important in that third step, is that we're also helping others along with
Yeah,
our self-care is helping others as well.
it absolutely is. And I think by example, but also just the activities, the way we spend that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important issue. In the book, I talk about the fact that scientists think the sun is eventually going to kind of implode. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
use up all its resources and then like turn into a black hole or something like that. The difference with sun people is that instead of depleting themselves of their resources, being sun people continually adds to our growth of light and wisdom and truth and love and compassion. There's no end to what we can become as we continue to be sun people. We
Yeah.
continue to influence the lives of those around us and eventually reach what we feel is our eternal potential, which is
Mm-hmm.
exaltation.
Yeah.
So
I
we're not
love that.
self-depleting when we're sun people.
Right. I often tell people, because I think as moms, we often think that when we take time for ourselves, that it takes away from somebody else. But I often bring up, if you are if you are already depleted, what are you actually giving somebody else?
Well,
Right? That
exactly.
they're not receiving the best of you. And when you take that time to really pour into yourself, you can be kind of that continuous stream, like you're talking about, of light, that you're
Yeah,
pouring in light so that you can give light, and taking that
exactly.
time to do that.
Exactly. And that's really when the scriptures teach that we shouldn't run faster than we have strength. There's
Yeah.
more wisdom in that because we do deplete our resources. And what do we have to give others in the future if we exhaust ourselves on a regular basis? So
Hmm.
you wouldn't, we tune up our cars every so often. Why? Because they
Yeah.
perform better when we do. We
Yeah.
have somebody come into our house and check our air conditioning and heating unit each year,
You're
so
right.
it doesn't, go out on us. So why not do the same for ourselves? And that's, I think, what the Sabbath was intended to do.
I love that. I think sometimes we get kind of sidetracked or detoured on what the Sabbath really is, but really is a self-care day. It's pouring in that light so that especially I think of the sacrament, like that is like probably the number one self-care thing you can do on a Sabbath, is partake of that power and strength that you need for your week to restore yourself.
Well, and you think about it, when I hear, them reading the sacrament prayer, I recite it to myself, but I take out the we and put in me. I make it first person,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I ask thee in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ, to bless and sanctify me
Yeah.
to my soul, that I can remember and I can keep the covenants and I can have his spirit to be with me.
Yeah.
And so as we personalize the renewal of our covenants, which is what the sacrament is intended to do, that I think that's self-care to say, yeah, I'm all in
Mm-hmm.
on this stuff. And I'm asking Heavenly Father to be all in with me and to help me
Yeah.
reach my full potential and keep the covenants I've made.
Yeah. I love that. Best self-care that you could
Yeah,
possibly get.
it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love this. This is so good. I love the concept of your book. If people want to find your book, where's the best place they can read it? And
It should be, I mean, it's available on all the online booksellers, I think, Amazon
okay.
and Barnes and Noble and all that. So
Yeah.
should be available there. And
Awesome.
I'm hope to release an audio version of it here in the next few weeks
Oh,
because most of the people I know
right.
don't
Yeah,
read
that's
books.
me. Yep. Yeah.
It's the audiobook.
That's so
So.
cool. Where will that be available? Like Audible and things like that? Can you get it
Yeah, they're
there?
going to
Okay.
release it on like 45 different, Spotify's and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff, I guess. So,
perfect. Okay.
so it's certainly on
Awesome.
Amazon and most of those.
Okay, well, by the time this releases, it should be on out on audio.
Out
So
there.
yeah,
Great.
so I'll link a couple of the popular ones, maybe the Amazon and Spotify and Audible for people so they can easily go listen to it. Because it sounds like this book could just be good self-care in general, learning how to be a sun person.
It really is intended to, and to support families and communities. And the
Yeah.
more we implement some principles and values into our lives, the better everything will be
Hmm.
in life. And right now, especially, I think with me as a therapist, I'm dealing with a lot of people who really are losing hope. They just feel overwhelmed and burdened with the evil in the world and the stuff that's going on, and their families are struggling, and they're just running out of energy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we all
Not
need,
pouring back in.
yeah, we all need something that's going to hopefully build up our confidence and our hope for the future.
And really making that priority to do that pouring back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
And
Awesome.
it's
Well,
better when we do it collectively too. It just magnifies whatever sun
exactly.
each of us brings, whatever light each of us
Yeah,
brings, is magnified when we put it all together. So,
right. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. It's been a new way to think about and look at self-care, and I just love the concept of being a sun person. So thank you so much
yeah.
for coming on the podcast.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. I hope you were able to find ways of healing, guidance, and peace. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend who would love to start thinking in a higher and holier way as well. Or hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any episodes. Also, check out the links in my show notes for other episodes you might like and links for other mental health resources on my website.